Shalom from Jerusalem. Ahlan wa sahlan. This is our Middle East. Al-Shakar al-Sadlana. Today, the prisoner's dilemma and the Iranian regime. $6 billion of American money reportedly paid to free 6 hostages. Is it regime ransom or helpful humanitarian care? Join us. I'm very honored today to have Colonel Mickey Segall, JCPA Senior Director on the Iranian regime issue, longtime expert on Iran. Mickey, what an honor it is to have you on the program today. Thanks very much for joining us from wherever you are. Mickey, tell us, we've got a lot to talk about. Just before we went on the air, we really talked about the Iranian regime Hydra. He's got many, many legs to this regime and many faces to the regime. It seems here from where we sit in the Middle East that the regime has really created a prisoner's dilemma, if you will, with the United States, having demanded some $6 billion, as reported, to release 6 American hostages. And we understand it could be a lot more money. It could be a lot more complicated. And in fact, this money is not going to be going to help the Iranian people, is it?
No, unfortunately not. As in the past, we've seen the regime extorting, actually, the West, taking prisoners, innocent prisoners, whether it's from the United States, from other European states, and demanding all kinds of demands, whether it's money or to release Iranian terrorists that conducted terrorist attacks on European soil to guarantee their release. Unfortunately, the Iranian people will not see any of this money. I must say that the process is not ended yet. Still, the American prisoners are not out yet, and maybe, as in the past, the Iranian will try to pose some more demands to the American. We have seen this morning the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman, Knani, said that the process is still going. He said that the timeline was established, but the prisoners are not out yet.
It's no irony, Mickey Segall, it's no irony or coincidence that the $6 billion deal on the table comes exactly at a time when, according to reports, the West is negotiating with the Iranian regime in order to come to some sort of mini JCPOA deal on keeping uranium enrichment well under 90% and somewhere over 60%.
Yes, it's true, but from I've seen many years of watching and monitoring the Iranian regime, we've seen the same patterns in every conduct between Iran and the West. For instance, when I was in service, when I did time in service in the IDF in the 90s, we've seen similar conduct. We've seen the Western diplomats that were kidnapped in Lebanon, and they were released only with a huge sums of money that were transferred to the Iranian regime. So we are seeing today the same conduct, but only the sums of money are higher, and the game is more of a geopolitical international game rather than between Iran and the Westerners that was back in the 90s, where there were a lot of Westerners kidnapped in Lebanon and released through the mediation of the so-called mediation of Iran vis-a-vis Imad Mourounia and friends in Lebanon. So the same patterns. What changed? The West changes for the worst. We've seen the Iranian going the same trail, the same path, defying the West, kidnapping, taking hostages in Lebanon, taking prisoners in Iran for all kind of weird, saying they were spying or doing something against the regime. The pattern is the same.
Mickey,
no price.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying up till now, Iran didn't pay any price for its conduct, whether when it killed Shafur Bakhtiar or the the PDTI leadership in Mykonos restaurant in Germany, no price at all. And the West is succumbing to the Iranian all the time. And this is where we are now. It's the same old story.
I think it's even worse than a same old story, because the Iranian regime has the United States-led Western alliance in a headlock. In a headlock because at the same time they're restoring the morality police, beating, torturing, imprisoning, raping women in prison at a higher rate. At the same time, they're negotiating for American prisoners, which keeps the American administration distanced from the massive violations of human rights within Iran. And the Iranian regime is laughing all the way to the bank. Why? Because this is the most progressive, politically progressive, ideologically progressive U.S. government in decades. And here, the ultra-conservative Iranian regime is making a joke out of the U.S. regime by freeing the very prisoners that they kidnapped for money, for billions, and at the same time doubling down on women as we approach Masa Amini's one-year murder in the streets of Tehran, or actually when she was in captivity by the Iranian security forces.
Yes, and we must also remember that the Iranians are also carrying out a vicious attack against journalists. Actually, the two journalists that reported Masha Amini killing last year, they are still facing trial and will do some time in prison because of reporting Masha Amini deaths in the captivity of the moral police and the intelligence of the IRGC. So there's another. I think what the Iranians are seeing is conflicting messages on behalf of the United States. For instance, we've seen just last week the build-up of American forces in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf with the 3,000 more troops and the other reconnaissance UAVs and other battleships in the region. But on the other end, we can see another thing, that's the negotiations over the JCPOA and the Iranian assets being unfreezed. And so the Iranians are seeing a very conflicting policy on behalf of the United States. One side you can see a build-up, and on the other side the ongoing negotiations. So there is no clear-cut message from the United States. I'm not talking about Europe because it's I don't know what to say about the European policy vis-a-vis Iran, if there's any, but the Iranians are seeing a very conflicting message from the United States.
How do you think what conflicted message do you see the Iranian regime understanding about the United States? How do you understand the conflicted message?
I think that what I said, on one side, on one hand, you can see the build-up in the Red Sea vis-a-vis the Houthis and the Iranian bases in Yemen. On the other end, as you said, the ongoing negotiation to free the prisoners and the ongoing behind-the-scene negotiations with the mediation of Oman and Qatar to say mini JCPOA. So I think the Iranians are a bit confused, though the Iranian regime has a very let's say very clear path. They know what they are doing. They have a point, and they are going there. They are not changing the strategy. We can see the ongoing build-up of the RGC with missiles, with supersonic missiles, with drones, with GPS-guided drones, with all kind of weaponry that is part of their asymmetric strategy vis-a-vis the United States. But they know what they do. They have this nuclear program which is proceeding. They have this build-up with weaponry which is proceeding. We've seen them putting away the reformists from all the bases of power in Iran. It's ongoing. The regime is fostering itself both from political point of view and from military point of view. And the problem is economic, which still remains, but the regime doesn't bother about the economy, doesn't bother about the welfare of the Iranian people, as you said in your opening remarks.
So that's an interesting point to transition on now, because there are many Iran watchers and leaders and activists and observers of the Iranian opposition that say that the Iranian regime is actually at a very weak point right now, and that's where they attempt to break out in terms of nuclear capability, in terms of enrichment, in terms of ballistic missile development. At the same time, the soft point, Mickey Segall, is the economy, because the economy is what also brings millions of the 88 million strong public of Iran into the streets. Are they as weak as some people say?
I think because the IRGC, the Ref Guards in Iran are actually the new strata, actually new strata in Iran, and they did what some people say a revolution within the revolution. Now they are ruling Iran, and now the Iranian people are suffering from the economy, and this is a challenge for the regime. But on the other end, the families, IRGC members' families are living pretty well in Iran. So this is the new casta in Iran. This is a new strata in Iran, and they profit from the sanctions, whether it's from smuggling oil, smuggling goods through the UAE, through other Iranian borders. They are living pretty well. But the Iranian people are the one that suffer, whether it's lack of water, ongoing crisis of water in the Sistan and Baluchistan areas, with the problem with Afghanistan, with the Ilman River, and a very heat wave that is now in Iran, water problems. So what I'm trying to say is that the economy is a major challenge for the regime. And this is why we have seen the gaps between the waves of protest in Iran is narrowing. We have seen the protest between the oil protest and the last year protest. The period of times are getting shorter and shorter. There is ongoing, let's say, boiling in Iran, and still the protest is on. But as you said, the problem is there is no one leader for the Iranian opposition. All the components for the perfect storm that will eventually take out the regime, all the components, all the ingredients are in place, but they don't have any a trigger event or a trigger leader that could take these components and put them together. We know that unfortunately, as we spoke before, the opposition is divided, very much divided. I don't know how many people in Iran supports the Pahlavi dynasty, or the Mujahideen Echad, or the Fedain Echad, or other opposition group in Iran. What we do know is that they are divided over ideology, over mythology, over how to topple the regime. This is the big problem in Iran, because all the ingredients for the revolution are there, but there is no one that can take the revolution and put it forward.
This has been a major problem for 44 years, this division, decentralization of opposition leaders and activists. And I wonder why, having been in touch with not a few activists and leaders, not just in politics, but across the civil society, as well as in the diaspora, in the Iranian diaspora, as well as inside Iran. How do you understand, as an expert on the regime and also in Iranian culture, this phenomenon of deep divisions within the Iranian opposition? Is it a question, is it actually, we said prisoner's dilemma in the title of the show. It seems to me, Mickey Segall, that the prisoner's dilemma is a double entendre, meaning not only does the Iranian regime hold physical prisoners from the United States and other Western countries, but it actually holds prisoners in its own country. It holds diplomatic prisoners in Europe and in the West. It holds prisoners everywhere you look. And even in the opposition, you can say it's a prisoner's dilemma, because everyone is locked in to an ideological cell, into a strategic cell, into a cultural cell. and nobody seems to be able to break out. So on the point of the opposition, how do you understand it? Why do they constantly smash their heads into these walls?
I think, first of all, the Iranian regime is, unfortunately, I'm saying, of course, is exploiting the divisions between the opposition groups, not only in the 90s, in the late 80s and 90s, he killed the skillful leaders of the opposition abroad, but now he's very sophisticated in infiltrating the ranks via social networks, via intimidating their families that remained in Iran. But we've seen the same groups that actually, let's say, that the groups that made the Iranian Revolution back in the 70s, in the late 70s, are the same groups that are now opposing the regime, because they were casted out of the revolution. The Islamists casted the Mujahideen Khalq and other groups from the revolution. The revolution basically was not Islamic revolution; it was an Iranian revolution, and all the forces that joined the revolution in the 70s, whether the Mujahideen Khalq, the Fadain Khalq, the Tudeh Party, and other opposition groups, with the charismatic Khomeini, now remained in their own shell, and they are not willing to give their ideology. They are not willing to bring in other leaders from other opposition groups, and this is why they are so divided. I think, in my opinion, eventually the revolution from Iran will not come from outside. It should be a very genuine revolution that comes from within the Iranian people, within the generations that now are exposed to the AI and other things, which unfortunately, of course, the Iranian regime is exploiting the new technology to counter the opposition. But I think all the new tools could provide an opportunity for the opposition from within Iran, using these tools, using the social networks, as Khomeini at the time used the video cassettes to bring in the revolution into Iran. I think they should use the social networks to coordinate their operation and somehow conduct this revolution to try and to bring Iran to the path of democracy.
You know, it says, the democracy and freedom for the Iranian people, and they have to be the ones that determine that path. It can't be through outside intervention. That's clear. As a fact, I've heard myself from very distinguished thought leaders and activists in the Iranian opposition their great concern that no country be perceived as what they call puppeteering, making the opposition the perceived puppets of any particular democratic country in the West. And having said that, Mickey, the point that you're making, which is very compelling, is that the deep divide among the decades-old ideologies within the Iranian opposition is also holding themselves prisoner within the opposition. And it seems to me that at the same time, one Iranian opposition leader told me just the other day at a JCPA event, we had a online roundtable called "A Path to a Democratic and Free Iran for the People of Iran." He said, 90% of the people in Iran don't like the regime. And at the same time, as well as between some 70% or 65% of Iranians are under the age of 40. So you have a lot of young Iranians that are not wedded to one ideology that the revolution fed or nurtured back in the 70s. But in fact, one could make the argument, could one not, that the new generation, the millions of young women and men in Iran who are pro-West, pro-United States, pro-Israel, pro-European Union, are really anti-religionists and actually see the only possibility for themselves as a free and democratic Iran as their guiding principle.
Yeah, I think, yes, but we must also remember that Iran is basically a religious country. And I think a lot of people want to practice their religion in Iran, not being enforced to do so, but practicing in their own way, whether it's the old way, the Zarathustrian way, or other ways they want to practice their religion, whether it's Islam, Shiite Islam, or other
or Sufis,
not being or Sufis or Baha'is that are now being even in these very days. The Baha'is are persecuted in Iran. They want to practice their religion, and I don't think that playing the anti-religion card in Iran will do good, because the Iranians, even before the revolution, during the Shah period and the Qajar dynasty and all other along Iranian history, the Iranian people were basically a religious people practicing the religious what Khomeini did is also a revolution in Shia, because he took the quietist Shia, which is practiced in Iraq by Said Sistani, and he revolutionized the Shia to be more active, as we see unfortunately in other places in the Middle East, where they export the revolution, their version of the revolution, their version of active Shia to hasten the appearance of the Mahdi, of the Messiah. I think maybe the Iranians should go back to their quietist Shia religion, not being as the regime wants them to be now.
That seems to have been the great Uri Lubrani of blessed memory used to have master classes on this notion that the al-Vilayat al-Faqih, the rule of the jurisprudent, was really pushing and pressing and urging political action in order to bring the Mahdi, as you say, back from deep underneath the ground and to bring the new reality. That's how we see a lot of this terrorist and subversion operations is due to that very activist, extremist Shiite mandate. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct. And this is why the Iranians are very afraid after the Iranian clerical regime, the Iranian clerics, basically in Rome and other places, they were afraid because the Shiites in Iraq, which are quietist, they were free. Sistani and the Assadr were free, and they practiced the quietist Shia. And the Qom was not neglected, but Najaf and Karbala were back to strive and to be a focal point for Shiite pilgrimage from all around the world. The Qom lost money, and the most Iranian, what the Iranians fear the most is that they will become spiritual centers again with the brand of quietist Shia. And this is why Iran is so keen to put her hold, its hold on Iraq, on the holy places in Iraq, and to try and restrain this quietism in the Shia.
And by the way, the Iranian regime is putting its vice grip not only on Najaf and Karbala, but also if you look at Jordan, Sunni Jordan today has several million Shia and Shiite shrines, as Lebanon, of course, where Shia and Sunni live together, Bahrain, of course, and across the Middle East, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Look at Afghanistan. Look at almost every country in the broader Middle East, as well as in Africa. You're seeing in Nigeria millions of Shia in northern Nigeria, and these types of Shia religious shrines,
and also in South America. We've seen the Iranian
Venezuela, the tri-border area.
Okay, there were tribes in South America, and we see Iranian clerics coming to those areas, to those tribes, trying to Shiaize the tribes, saying say La ilaha illallah 3 times, and then you're a Shiite. It's an Iranian ongoing effort. We are seeing this in Africa, and we're seeing it in South America. and we've seen Iranian broadcasting, whether it's Alam or other news agencies, broadcast in dozens of languages to or the Hispan TV, which Iran transmit in a religious context to in Spanish or Portuguese or in other Swahili or other languages to audiences in Africa and in South America, in order to export their brand of the Shiite revolution.
Absolutely, and Press TV also, which is Iran's.
Of course, the English and in Arabic and English. Yeah,
the Iranian regime can really teaches a very important lesson about dawah and about the old Soviet the system of active measures, what today is called in the post-Cold War era hybrid warfare, ideological warfare, where I must say Israel, the United States have become less skilled since the end of certainly since the end of the Cold War for the United States, and Israel still has to figure out how to fight soft war, how to fight this type of dawah ideological warfare, because this is where the Iranians are masters. The Iranian regime are masters in what they call misinformation, malinformation, disinformation. This is really what we're saying today. And the last little part of this show that we should talk about, Mickey Segall, is you look at this terror attack, so-called terror attack in Shiraz, that was accused. The accusation made by the regime in these hours that we're speaking now is that there was an extremist Salafi terrorist that is carried out and killed. I would not be surprised if it was actually an arm of the regime that actually carried out a terror attack against its own people so that they could blame the outside enemy and take action. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a bit far-fetched, Dan. We've seen I saw some video footage from the scene, and I looked into some kind of in some of ISIS channels. They claim responsibility for the attack, and they showed the guy. He was wearing some kind of a ski mask, so maybe it's not him. I don't know, but good conspiracies are good. But I think this time I've seen a real claim of responsibility on behalf of ISIS. In this, it's not the first attack in Shiraz. We've seen also Jaish al-Adil conducting operations in Sistan and Balochistan area. You spoke at your promo on the Baluchis, Sistanis, and other. There are a lot of people who have had blood on the Iranian regime, and the drought in the eastern areas of Iran is very, very critical. It's a very, very critical. A lot of hundreds of thousands of population cannot work in their fields. They don't have water, and we've seen the same problem in Khuzestan, which is very profitable for the Iranian regime, but on the other hand, with the Arab Sunnis, we've seen a great air pollution there in this area. So, as we say, there are a lot of problems in Iran, a lot of ground for opposition on many causes. But as we say, there is no common denominator to put all this together into a perfect storm.
All right. It is a perfect storm, and we tried to bring up some of the lightning and the thunder in the storm in the last 25, 28 minutes. Mickey Segall, we'll leave it at that. We have a lot more to talk about as we move forward and follow developments, but I think we've tried to lay out the prisoner's dilemma and the Iranian regime in so many angles and faces and complexions of the problem, the prisoner's dilemma, inside of Iran, outside of Iran, in the Western Alliance, among the Iranian public itself. A lot of work to be done in order to remove this regime, today's greatest sponsor, director, and inspirer of global terror that the world knows today. So Mickey Segall, a long-time JCPA Senior Director on the Iranian desk and former security expert on all things Iran and the Arab world. Thank you ever so much for shedding light, joining us. Deeply appreciate your insights.
Thank you for having me.